The worldview of any given people is oftentimes encapsulated in what's labeled as a religion. One of the interesting things about the term religion is people don't usually have such a term until they encounter somebody who has a different belief system. And then you have to come up with a word that means basically what I believe and what you believe. Even though we think they're different, we're going to give it this label, religion. And so we want to look at religions and think about them that way, as being a set of worldviews, a set of behaviors and habits and thought patterns that help people to survive in the world. And within any worldview, that just so happens that because people interact with plants a lot, we find many plants woven through worldviews. And so therefore plants are really important symbols within each and every religion around the world. Within any particular worldview, we find that there's a set of terms, specific words that are used that hold a great deal of meaning. And a lot of times each of these terms requires quite a lengthy definition to really describe what it means. And yet people who hold that worldview will use that term quite freely and naturally and carry with it that whole body of meaning within a single word. One of the interesting features that we'll see with this particular episode, where we're looking at plants in Buddhism, is that a lot of times a single plant, or the name of a plant, will embody within it a large range of meaning and a great depth of philosophical thought. And so as we look at each of the plants, keep in mind that for many of these plants, just the name of the plant, to people who hold a worldview within Buddhism, that name of that plant carries with it a whole range of ideas, a sweep of emotion and beliefs and understandings of the way the world works. The second point that I want you to note as we go along is that Buddhism, just as each of the other major world religions, is derived from earlier religions. In the case of Buddhism, it derives out of a range of Hindu traditions. And so it brings with it a lot of the beliefs and worldviews from that earlier religion of Hinduism. And so we'll see those woven through some of the plants. And in fact, there's many ways in which Hinduism and Buddhism are related, particularly when we look at the plants that are being used and the symbols of the plants. Embodied within each religion is an understanding of what the ideal state of being should be, how people should behave, how they should live their lives, what's in the future, and what do we hold as hope that keeps us going. And so within a religion, we find a set of parameters that teach us how you should live your daily life and what you should do if you've done something wrong, what is right, what is wrong, and a whole range of issues like this. And a lot of what a religion is about teaching people how to get from a point where they happen to be to a state of some kind of perfection. One of the interesting features of the more important religions around the world, the so-called great religions, is that they all come from approximately the same part of the world, this narrow area that you see on this map in southern Asia. Out of these traditions, we see the production of the religions of the Near East, which includes Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. As we move to the west into India, we find the religions of Hinduism and Buddhism, and many derivatives of each of these. One of the fascinating aspects of the world's great religions is that they all contain sacred texts, written documents that relate over many generations the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of that particular worldview. And it's probably this fact that they are written that has enabled these religions to really build and grow over time and spread into other parts of the world. And so when we consider the aspects that differentiate between traditional religion that has not necessarily spread to other parts of the world and a religion that has developed and spread, this is one of the key characteristics, is the ability to write about that religion. Now, secondarily, there's also elements within a religion where people come to grips with the issue of what is truth. And as soon as people start wrestling with the issue of truth and come to some conclusions about it, we see that kind of an offspring of that is the importance of sharing that truth with other people. Because you think about it, you know, if you have a belief that you hold to be true and you think it's important, wouldn't you want other people to know about this? And so we see that a second feature of the major religions of the world is that they tend to spread their beliefs into adjacent cultures and spread their ideas. One of the kind of side issues within this is that as the great religions have spread from culture to culture to culture, they've also accumulated elements of each of those cultures that they move into. And so we see that different sects develop, and that many of these are based upon local or regional or cultural bases that incorporate elements of beliefs of peoples who were not part of the original religion, but who have now accepted a religion and have blended into it elements of their traditional religion. This is oftentimes referred to as a syncretic phenomena. But it's really important when we look at the spread of religions around the world. It's also really important when we look at the roles of plants within religion, because the plants that are used by people, more often than not, are the plants of their own ancient religion that has now been incorporated within the religion that they've adopted anew in latter generations. When we consider the origins of Buddhism, we need to look back to before Buddhism emerged, and what we find is that it consists of a set of oral traditions of some early agriculturalists in India. These people herded goats and cattle, so they were pastoralists. They were also arboriculturalists, growing trees for fruits and nuts, including plants such as mangoes and tamarinds. Over time, these people developed a written history and started to record in writing the ideas and stories that they had from earlier ages that have been passed down in an oral tradition. In addition to developing their history, they also developed poetry and philosophy, and a lot of this reflects the perspectives of people who live in small cities and practice agriculture. And the kind of agriculture that they practiced include the growing of grains and legumes, the grains including wheat, millet, rice, and other common grains that we find in South Asia now, and also legumes such as hyacinth beans and lentils, and other legumes that are found in South Asia. When Buddhism starts to emerge, there's a transformation that occurs, and this transformation occurs from a very strong Hindu background into a sect of Hinduism that becomes named Buddhism after the founder. Hinduism itself is really an amalgamation of a wide range of tribal religions. These are very diverse and probably didn't have a common origin. But over time, as the communities of India start to come together, share ideas and thoughts, we see that they share their beliefs, their gods, and that these accumulate. And so in Hinduism we have a large range of deities, of kind of perspectives on how the world functions, and particularly important, a wide range of plants that are being used as symbols within religion. In fact, it's likely that Hinduism has more plant symbols than probably all the rest of the world's religions added together. Hinduism develops amongst sedentary agricultural peoples and really starts to thrive as these populations become larger. The societies use writing, and they are highly stratified societies. And in fact, over time, Hinduism itself starts to reinforce a caste system amongst these stratified societies. And in fact, we could see that Buddhism is to a certain extent a reaction against the caste system and a belief system that develops to try to overcome some of the complexities and inequities that arise within a caste system. Hinduism also plays a big role in the development of many smaller empires, and so we see the spread of Hinduism all the way down into the areas of Indonesia, over into Southeast Asia, into the Persian region, and up into the Himalayas. So it's spread over a fairly wide range. Buddhism then comes along with the arrival of Prince Siddhartha, who goes through a series of phases in his life where he starts to begin to realize that suffering is a major issue that he needs to address personally, and he thinks needs to be addressed within his society. He, along the way, decides that he should reject any idea of some kind of supervening God, and that that suffering is the key issue that needs to be addressed, and that humans are the source of the suffering, and that it is our misunderstanding of the world that leads to this suffering. Buddhism develops as a cross-cultural phenomena. It's not involved in a government early on, although there are subsequent governments that pick up Buddhism and move it forward. And Buddhism can be seen as spreading from culture to culture to culture rather rapidly in its development, covering much of Asia, going into Southeast Asia and into Indonesia. Along the way, there's a great deal of syncretism that occurs, where elements of traditional religions that are encountered are incorporated within Buddhist beliefs locally. And so we have a wide range of Buddhist sects that develop, and many of these, the functional differences between them lies in the belief systems of prior religions that have been incorporated into Buddhism locally. And so we see a fair amount of that. In addition, there's a great deal of manipulation by local governments, where one king or prince will declare that he is now a Buddhist, and Buddhism becomes his weapon for fighting somebody else. And each subsequent prince will claim that they have the true authority and true power and are following the true beliefs, and they'll combat other princes, even other princes who also declare themselves to be Buddhists. So this is not an unusual phenomenon. There are several key elements of Buddhism that we can see across the major sects of Buddhism. Now, this doesn't mean that all of the sects hold this true, but by and large this can be considered to be a realistic evaluation. The first is that godliness pervades everything, but there is no God above people. The second is that each person really has a choice to do good things or bad things, or to do nothing at all, and that it's within these choices that people determine their fate. Choosing to do bad or good has a consequence, and a lot of times this is referred to as karma, where you can develop or accumulate good karma from doing good things, or bad karma from doing bad things. The consequence of doing bad things is the inability to perceive truth or to attain enlightenment. And this leads subsequently to rebirth or transmigration. And this is not exactly what you want to do. You want to get out of the frame of being reincarnated or reborn. And so one of the fundamental issues within Buddhism is to realize through enlightenment what the real world is around you, and through this enlightenment to escape from it and no longer have to be trapped by the cycle of rebirth through reincarnation. So, some of the key elements of Buddhism are that the world is an illusion based upon ignorance, that contemplation and meditation lead to realization of truth and allow you to escape from the illusion and obtain enlightenment. Salvation is gained through knowledge. And so Buddhism has a strong tradition of pursuing knowledge. And then lastly, meditation is most successful in certain kinds of places, and oftentimes these places are natural environments such as groves of trees or other kinds of quiet or peaceful environments. And so we find that in many Buddhist sects there is a tendency to preserve natural areas specifically for the purpose of meditation and therefore achieving enlightenment. Within Buddhism, there is an ideal state of being that each individual hopes to attain, and they'll work on this either trying to achieve this in one lifetime or over a series of several lifetimes, and each one getting sequentially closer and closer to the state that's desired. So through meditation and contemplation, one realizes the truth about the world around them and is able to see past the illusion and no longer be blinded and held by it. And there's many aspects that one can hope to achieve, And the state of being that is hoped for is the state of nirvana. The aspects of this are divine ear, divine eye, magical powers, a lack of rebirth, loss of desire, and the knowledge of former lives. And all of this together is the state of being that one would hope for. Okay, so let's finally get to the plants. When we think about plants that are used in Buddhism, we can see that there's several patterns that emerge. The first is that plants and their environments are elements of godliness, and so all plants are sacred in this sense. Buddhism brings forth the Hindu emphasis upon worship of plants as spirits, as representations of godliness, and as temples or shrines. And so we'll see that within Buddhism there are certain trees and other kinds of plants that are considered to be endowed with special sacredness and therefore are treated with special reverence. People's intentions towards plants and plant environments may be good or bad. And so basically the way that you treat plants and the environment has to do with the kind of karma that you're accumulating. And so obviously, you know, there's the potential in here for a positive environmental stance where people will treat the environment appropriately in order to obtain good karma. Positive intentions towards plants translate into positive rebirth and therefore lead an individual closer to ultimate enlightenment. And so there is a strong relationship within Buddhism between the way that people lead their lives and the way they interact with plants and their hope for the future in order to obtain enlightenment. There's a number of plants that are mentioned in different Buddhist texts. Hundreds of species are mentioned, but there aren't really any formal lists that are put together that include all of these. And some of this is because there's actually a large number of Buddhist texts, and not all of the sects use the same group of texts. Trees are particularly important within Buddhist texts, and flowers in general are important as symbols of beauty in the world. Some of the plants that are mentioned include foods, medicines, there's wild and domesticated plants that are discussed, and these are discussed within a range of contexts. This includes historical events that are recorded, poems, songs, wise sayings, and most importantly as metaphors for different spiritual concepts. And that's the main thing that we want to look at right now, is some of the metaphors for spiritual concepts. So one of the most important issues is the roles of trees in Buddhism. And there's really a lot of trees that have an important role, and these are referenced in the Buddhist scriptures, and they're considered in murals in different temples. Just lots of trees become really important. When we look at the trees that are important, there's a pattern that emerges. First of all, these tend to be long-lived and large or powerful trees, and they're thought to be powerful organisms. Groves of trees were oftentimes used as places of worship before temples were built. And sometimes there will be temples that are associated with a grove of trees. There may be a grove of trees that's within a temple complex, or there may be a temple that's within a grove of trees. So there's a tight relationship between groves of trees or large trees and places of appropriate worship. Buddhists also have traditions of using sacred trees as poles, and the pole is considered to be the essence of the tree. And these form the spokes of a wheel that forms one of the primary symbols within Buddhism. And so trees represent turning points in life. And so if you think of the imagery of a wheel with spokes, and the trees are the spokes of the wheel, those trees represent times that you're going through a transition or a period of movement. And so this is a powerful symbol that we see radiating throughout Buddhism. There's quite a few different roles for trees within Buddhism. Some of these roles include that trees are living beings with spirits themselves, much the same as humans are living beings with spirits. Trees may be sacred markers as personifications of deities. So there may be a specific spirit that's very powerful, and it has taken on the tree as a marker of itself. Sacred groves, as I mentioned, are places of worship. Parts of trees, such as wood, may be used to make temples, and by building a temple out of wood, you're basically incorporating the spirit of the tree into the temple. Ground wood or resin can be used as incense to represent a particular deity, and so sometimes a particular kind of incense will be made with small amounts of a particular species of wood in it, and that's incorporating that spirit within the incense burning process. Flowers and leaves, just kind of as general categories, also have important symbolism within Buddhism. Flowers can be brought together in heaps or worn as garlands, and these are intended to attract good. And sweet-smelling flowers are thought to repel evil. Flowers also serve as symbols of virtue and other desirable characteristics that one might want to have associated with themselves and with their worship. Leaves can serve as symbolic offerings to specific deities. So certain leaves will be offered to a deity in order to entice their favor. Leaves can be used as symbolic requests. Sometimes there's writing on the leaves, sometimes the leaves are just given as offerings. And leaves can serve as symbolic statements of actions or commitments. So by bringing leaves or by carrying certain leaves, it helps to remind you of that commitment or to show others that you have made a certain kind of commitment. Probably the most important plant that's symbolic within Buddhism is the Bo or Bodhi tree, as we see standing above me here. The Bodhi tree is a symbol of enlightenment, and in fact part of the relationship of the Bodhi tree with Buddhism is that the first Buddha, Gautama Buddha, was thought to have gained enlightenment while sitting under a bo tree on the banks of the Ganges. The bo tree also serves as a symbol of compassion or love. Now, the bo tree isn't able to live in all parts of the world, and so in places where it's too cold for it to grow, because it's really a tropical tree, people will sometimes substitute the linden tree. One of the things that's interesting to think about when we consider the bo tree is that the bo tree is a fig. And if we look around the world, a large number of religions hold fig trees to be sacred. And so this is true of Christianity and Judaism, of Islam, of Hinduism, of Buddhism, and of hundreds of other religions that are minor religions. In addition to the bo tree, Buddhism has several other fig trees that are considered to be sacred. One of these is the Ashwantha tree, which is Ficus bengaliensis. In Hawaii, we have these trees planted all over the place, and they're particularly common in parks where they are noted for having their aerial roots that hang down and people can swing on them and lots of things like this. The Ashwantha tree is considered to be a symbol of eternal power, and it's a home for sages, holy men, travelers, as well as spirits that roam. It's also considered to be a symbol of compassion and love. Frequently, if you find a Ashwantha tree in an area where there are Buddhists, you'll find that it's been decorated with flowers or has had offerings and gifts left at the base of the tree. This is really a common phenomenon, particularly for really large trees that are reckoned to be very old and powerful and have strong spiritual significance. Mangoes that are commonly found throughout the tropics of the world are also a sacred tree to Buddhists. Mangoes serve as symbols of prosperity and wealth and of longevity. Remedies made from these can be used to alleviate suffering. The leaves and flowers are given as offerings. Wood is used for sacred funeral pyres and would be used to burn the body of a loved one. And so, therefore, the tree is also associated with fate and destiny. Sallow wood is used for a number of different purposes, but its primary symbol is as a symbol of the combination of birth and death, or of rebirth. Buddha was born under a sal tree, is what tradition holds. Oftentimes carvings are made out of sal wood, and these may be images of Buddha or they may be motifs. Sometimes this is associated with animal sacrifice, which is pulled in from older Hindu traditions. It's said that when Buddha died, he lay down to die under a sal tree. So he was both born under one and died under one. And therefore we see the strong symbolism of birth and death. After Buddha's death, white flowers fell to the ground and covered his body under the sal tree. And so the flowers have this kind of symbolism of covering up death and purifying death. Wood and white resin from sal trees is used to make incense, and oftentimes this will be found in incense sticks that are burned within a temple area. Sandalwood, which is widely known for its use in incense and as a pleasant smelling wood in boxes and other materials, is also a sacred wood for Buddhists. It's considered to be a symbol of cooling breezes. It's thought to be feared by evil spirits, and therefore keeping it around is a way of keeping evil spirits away. Sandalwood trees are also considered to be the homes of poisonous snakes. Sandalwood trees, of course, are a parasitic plant that is frequently seen growing on other plants. And sometimes sandalwood trees will grow as clumps, and they'll have little notches in them that hold water, and sometimes that water is considered to be sacred. Lots of important associations with sandalwood. Banana hybrids are also important symbols within Buddhism. One of the interesting things to consider with this is that it's highly likely that bananas started to show up in India, where they're not a native plant, probably at about the same time that Buddhism was emerging. And so bananas would have formed a symbol very early on within Buddhism of kind of a new way of looking at the world. Bananas are considered to be symbols of delicate physical beauty and of false strength. The trunk is discussed as being an illusion. It's clear that early Buddhists recognized that what we think of as banana trees are not really trees, that it's just a bundle of leaves that holds up the fruit. And so that bundle of leaves was looked at as being a false trunk or an illusion of reality. Buddha himself discussed bananas at several points and used them as illustrations of people struggling against the illusion of the world. One of the most beloved symbols within Buddhism is that of the lotus blossom. Buddha is oftentimes pictured sitting on a lotus blossom, and in this pose he will be attaining enlightenment while sitting there. The lotus is a symbol of faithfulness, of supreme purity, and there's kind of an interesting ecological observation that we can see within the understandings of the lotus blossom. Lotus as a plant is a root or a tuber that lives deep in the mud under swampy places, and so it kind of lives in a really nasty, dark area. And coming up out of that, coming up through the mud of the swamp, will emerge above that this beautiful, pure flower. And so that symbolism of the purity emerging out of the impurity is much of the symbolism of the lotus blossom, and probably why it's such an important symbol within Buddhism. If you visit a Buddhist temple, such as the one behind me, you'll oftentimes see lotus blossoms either carved or in this case in gold. Here we have one carved out of wood that Buddha is sitting on. We have gold shrined ones next to him. If you look at these images that I'm showing you now, these are of Buddhist temples in Thailand, and we can see that lotus flowers are being given as offerings by the individuals who are visiting the temple and praying and meditating. And so lotus is probably one of the most prominent symbols within Buddhism, and it clearly is a good symbol of how plants are incorporated within Buddhism specifically, and religions in general. A plant where people have noted the ecology and have used that ecology as it's understood by the wider community as a way to relate spiritual truths as they're understood by the practitioners of that faith.